So in today's video, I want to show you the 3 books that grew my course business to multi-7 figures. If you don't know who I am, my name is Ryan Matthews. And before you get all worked up, no, I don't have a course to sell you. I actually have made my money inside the course business by partnering with experts and helping them sell their expertise online, not by selling courses to coaches, teaching coaches how to be coaches to more coaches, as you've probably seen out there. So without further ado, reading. My story of reading is probably similar to most of yours. I hated reading growing up, and I had read no business books. When I started business back in 2019, I was very green on everything. I hadn't gone to college, I had just finished high school, and basically my business education was the extent of what was on YouTube, right? Which I had learned a lot from, but it wasn't until I met a good friend of mine now named Spencer Van, who built an 8-figure company inside the world of online education, and was very generous and offered to mentor me because he had seen one of my funnels and he was like, dude, your funnel is horrible. Please let me help you. I won't charge you anything. Just let me help you. I was like, all right. And we started working together. He said, hey, I will not help you unless you read this book, Made in America by Sam Walton. So arguably, Made in America by Sam Walton was one of the most impactful books because it was the first book I actually read cover to cover and actually finished and was able to get through and loved it. I loved every single second of it. The feeling of finishing a book was exhilarating. So shout out to Spencer Van for getting me on the path of reading. So the first book, Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. So the subline of this book is the underground playbook for converting your online visitors into lifelong customers. So what this book taught me is I read this in probably late 2019 when I was trying to figure out my funnels and what I was gonna do and how do I get these people, right, that are strangers and how do I turn them into customers, right? And that's what this book taught me through teaching me the power of stories, right? This is one of the biggest theses of the book is don't tell people what to do, right? Show them, give them the aha moment of that through the use of stories, right? So Spencer, again, go back to him, he would go through my funnels, my webinars, and he'd look at them and he'd say, this is horrible, right? Like you're teaching here, you're not telling any stories, you need to not tell, but tell a story, right? Hopefully that makes sense. And this book was so helpful for me in that way where it taught me how, different stories like the Epiphany Bridge, the Heroes to Journeys, the Future-Based Cause, all these different frameworks for selling, for marketing, and for changing somebody from a stranger to a paying client. So I would definitely recommend this if you are looking to do just that. So this is something, honestly, that I continually go back to. If I launch a new funnel, I look at this. So that's book number 1, Expert Secrets. Book number 2 is Great by Choice by Jim Collins. So this is arguably my favorite business book. I've always been very, very fascinated with why some companies like Sears, Circuit City, Radio Shack, etc. can be huge and then go out of business. Like what happens? And he actually has another book called How the Mighty Fall, which addresses that more in specificity as to how those companies fall. But what this one is Uncertainty, Chaos, and Luck, Why Some Thrive Despite Them All is the subheadline here. And he highlights here more, why do companies continue to thrive, right? And he highlights that in multiple of his books, but I like this one in particular because he goes very specific on different CEOs and what they did to 10x the market that they were in compared to their comparison companies. So these people that were 10xing, right? Like your Microsofts, your Apples, your Googles, like how did they do it, right? Over the course of American history, how have these companies grown to be so big? And he goes over many things, and some of the biggest takeaways that I had that were impactful for our business was, number 1, he talks about this concept of being productively paranoid, that the CEOs who 10x their company, that beat the market by 10 times, were productively paranoid. They knew with utmost certainty that at some point, regardless of really whatever happens in the world, at some point, things will turn against them. Things will get unlucky, right? I mean, you just think about this. I read this book at the beginning of COVID, and this was the perfect time to read it because at some point, something is going to happen, right? And if you're not paranoid, productively paranoid about it, you're not going to be ready for it. Ray Dalio has this great quote. He says, if you're worried, then you don't need to worry, but if you're not worried, then you need to worry. Just saying, you need to be prepared, you need to be thinking about the things that may come up, and that's what he talks about a lot in this book. He quotes Bill Gates, talking about how Microsoft had enough cash to survive an entire year without a penny of revenue, which is not common. Southwest Airlines as well was the only company in 2001 to turn a profit. The only airline company in 2001 to turn a profit after 9/11, right? And the reason for that, one of the big reasons for that, is they stayed true to their mission. They were hyper vigilant in the time when things were chaotic and uncertain, right? And they had over $1 billion of cash on hand at the beginning of 9/11, right? Which is just not common at all inside the airline industry. One of the interesting things he talked about as well in this book is that these companies that 10x'd, they did not take bigger bets, right? They weren't more innovative. They weren't more bold. That was all fairly similar. What they did, and they didn't have more good luck or bad luck, right? They pretty much all were equal on that front. But what was the difference was the way they responded to it, right? They had a better foundation for the way they made decisions because they had values and things that were very, very important to them that they stuck by, right? So when good luck came or bad luck came, they had these principles that helped guide them through it. So I definitely recommend reading this book. A couple other things that he talked about was number one, the 20-mile march. It was this idea that these CEOs were resolved to grow at a predetermined rate, right? So I'll give you an example of this. In 2020, going into 2021, my team, we sat down on one of my partner's businesses and I said, hey, we have to set some goals for this next year, some targets to hit. And I just read this book that year and I was like, we need to set what's the lowest amount of growth we're going to tolerate and what's the most amount. And we actually had to slow down that year because we were pacing over our target, right? Our target was $1.5 to $2 million that year, and we were pacing over $2 million. So I had to slow it back down because it talks about a lot of things in this book of the consequence of growing too fast. So we'd rather grow slowly year after year than just grow too fast. One last note actually on this is this idea of bullets versus cannonballs. So this is something that we stuck by very, very heavily inside the life of our company, was that you basically have two different types of bets of actions inside your company. You have bullets and cannonballs. And you think about this in the terms of resources, right? So you have a certain amount of cash and a certain amount of time that you can invest as a company, right? And a bullet is something that takes a small amount of time, small amount of focus, and a small amount of money, and it's a test, right? So you can imagine this. If you're shooting, you can use a bullet to see if you're on target, right? If your hypothesis is right. If it is, then you put more resources in, you shoot the cannonball, right? And this is what these great companies did, and that way their bets worked out more often than not because they were really tested well with not too many resources. So if we were thinking about running a new advertising platform, making a new funnel, we'd make these bullets before we make a cannonball. And every single time I went backwards at that business, I had fired a cannonball before firing a bullet, right? And I did that many times with funnels and different things. So that's book number 2. Book number 3 is $1 Trillion Coach by Bill Campbell. So this book really helped me transition from being the doer of the business to empowering the team and letting the team run the business and grow to that next level, right? And this is an essential step for any CEO hoping to go to the multi-7-figure level, right? Hoping to make that jump. It's written by some of the top execs at Google, Eric Schmidt, Jonathan Rosenberg, and Alan Eagle. And it's written about this guy, Bill Campbell, who coached, just tons of different people. If you look at the back of this, COO of Facebook, of Apple, of general partner, of YouTube, of Google. Just tons of people inside the world of Silicon Valley. And they call him the $1 Trillion Coach because he was responsible for more than $1 trillion in business. And he kind of talks about all these different concepts in the realm of leadership, right? So it's the leadership playbook of Silicon Valley. And he talks about many things. I'm going to give you a few of the main points that I think will be very helpful for you. Number 1, it's the people. So the top priority of any manager is the well-being of their people, the well-being and success of their people. Number 2, lead based on first principles. This one was very, very helpful for me. So define the first principles for the situation, the immutable truths that are foundation for the company and the product, right? What are these reasons you're selling this to begin with? And then help guide any decisions based on those first principles. And we went back to this constantly at our company. Third, money's not about money. So compensating people well demonstrates love and respect and ties them strongly to the goals of the company. Heads held high. If you have to let people go, be generous, treat them well, and celebrate their accomplishments. Next up, only coach the coachable. The traits that make a person coachable include honesty and humility, the willingness to persevere and to work hard, and a constant openness to learning. We look for that in all of our different hires. Next, practice free-form listening. Listen to people with your full and undivided attention. Don't think ahead to what you're going to say, and ask questions to get to the real issue. That is one of the best pieces of information I can give you about sales in general. Next, don't stick it in their ear. Don't tell people what to do. Offer stories and help guide them to the best decisions for them. Sounds very similar to Expert Secrets. It's just as applicable in leadership as it is in marketing. Winning right. Strive to win, but always win right with commitment, teamwork, and integrity. The lovely reset. To care about people, you have to care about people. Ask about their lives outside of work, understand their families, and when the going gets tough, show up. And lastly, the percussive clap. Cheer demonstrably for people and their successes. So overall, my biggest takeaway from that book was to care about your team and their successes more than your own. I mean, it's kind of like a golden rule, right? And if you do that, a lot of things fall in line and the company works, the culture grows and gets better. So these were the 3 books that taught me how to grow my course business to multi-7 figures. I'd recommend you read them all. The links will be down in the description. Hopefully you got something out of this video. If you like this video, here's another video that I think you'll like as well, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.